Dear friends, welcome to Sangha Storytime and to The Taste of Earth, A Taste of Earth by Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm going to read The Voyage by Thich Nhat Hanh. It had not rained for over 6 months. Streams and rivers, bordered by parched grasses, barely trickled. The rice plants were no more than dry straw. The earth was piteously cracked. People sought refuge in the forests to escape the burning noon heat. No wind blew. The air was thick and still, as if it weighed by some heavy burden. Alco withdrew to the lofty mountains the day that Lac Dragon departed. But when she heard the people's tormented cries, she descended. Distressed to see her children's plight, she knew she had to summon Dragon Prince. He had surely ascended to the throne by now. Why was it taking him so long? She had carefully guarded Lac Dragon's jade stone, which she now entrusted to a young man named Hanh, and she instructed him to go down to the sea palace and implore the new dragon emperor, her husband, to make rain. Hanh was an intelligent and courageous young man from the village of Hak Trang, which was renowned as a centre of rich culture and the home of many bright and talented men and women. In the centre of Hat Trang grew a 4,000-year-old tree whose branches were pierced the white clouds. Its branches, where many cranes nested, shaded a vast area. Whenever Alco descended the high mountains to meet with her people, she met there beneath the tree. Hanh was well loved by other villagers. Although Alco selected him to go to the sea palace, she was unable to offer him any directions. She simply gave him the jade stone and said he must find a young woman to accompany him. Hanh was fond of a young woman his age named Mai. Besides being charming and graceful, she was sharp-witted and capable. Travelling beneath the ocean with Mai would be most pleasant. But he hesitated to ask her. What if they encountered venomous sea monsters? He could not bear the thought of any harm coming to Mai. On the path to Mai's house, Hanh wondered how we would find the way to the sea palace. Alco said the jade stone would cause the water to part, but the ocean was so immense. How would he know which direction to go? How long would it take to reach the palace? As he was pondering these things, a voice startled him. What are you thinking about so hard, Hanh? Hanh looked up. On the path in front of him stood Mai, smiling. She said in a playful voice, "Can it be that you are wondering how to reach the sea palace? If so, I can help you, because I know the way." Han's eyes opened wide in surprise. "How do you know about my quest? Our goddess mother asked me to go only this morning. Who told you?" Mai took his hand and led him up a nearby hill. She said, "Let's sit here a while. I'll tell you my story from the very beginning." She began. "Yesterday at noon the heat was so unbearable I went down to the river to wash my face. As you know, all that is left is a small trickle. Even though the water is muddy, I scooped up a handful and meant to splash my face when I noticed I'd scooped up a tiny pink fish, no bigger than my little finger. It was so beautiful. It had shiny scales and tiny gem-like eyes. I didn't rinse my face but carried the little fish home. I placed it in a bowl filled with water and went outside to do my chores. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash. I ran back into the house and discovered the bowl had fallen from the table and shattered. You wouldn't believe it, but the fish was now 100 times larger, the size of your arm. I was certainly surprised, and I took it and placed it in our rain barrel, hoping to keep it alive. This morning when I awoke, I went outside to check on it, and the fish had grown so much it could barely budge in the barrel. I knew then that it must be a magic fish, and I said, "Let me return to the river." But the fish answered, "No, I can't grow smaller again. My permission to stay on land is up. I can only continue growing larger until I resume my original form. If you want to help me, please carry me down to the ocean." I was scared. Knowing the fish didn't have much time left, I picked it up and started to run to the sea. But my arms grew tired and I was forced to stop several times to catch my breath. When at last we reached the sea, the fish said, "I am a princess from the sea palace. Thank you, my sister, for saving my life. I must admit it was foolish of me to swim up a dry riverbed like that. But now the danger has passed. To show my gratitude, I will tell you what has caused the drought and how Her Majesty our Co has asked someone to go down to the sea palace to summon Dragon Emperor. Although I dare not intrude into the affairs of the elders, I can at least offer you some advice. To reach the sea palace, a traveller must first possess a special jade stone, which belongs to Dragon Emperor. 2 people must take the journey together. The shortest route is by the eastern sea, but if you go that way, you must pass the sea monster's lair. Dragon Emperor does not yet know that this monster has been attacking fishermen. This monster possesses such formidable powers, I dare not oppose it in any combat alone. But I can teach you a mantra that will frighten the monster so much it will allow you to pass without harm. Dragon Emperor taught me this mantra himself to use in perilous situations. "Did you learn it by heart?" asked an excited Hanh. "Yes," replied Mai, "and I'll teach it to you in a moment. The sea princess also told me that the fates had chosen a certain young man to make the journey and that he must ask a young woman to accompany him. She said the young man was a special friend of mine. She said, what I'm about to tell you will make you the only person on the land who knows the way to the sea palace. The first couple to travel beneath the waves will share a brilliant future together. Remember everything I tell you. Tomorrow at sunrise, proceed at once in the direction of the sun until you reach the sea. When you hold up the Dragon Emperor's precious jade stone, the water will part to reveal a path. After you have travelled a short distance, you will no longer be able to see by the light of the sun. At that moment the jade stone will shine like a lantern to guide your steps. Remember that there should be nothing but golden sand beneath the feet at all times. If you step on a stone, a patch of seaweed, or a spot of mud, you will know that you have strayed from the path. Stop at once. Hold the stone up, look around you, and make your way back to the golden sand. Do not stray in any direction where you see violet, green, or red. Those colours are a sign that you are near a sea monster's lair. After a day's travel, you will begin to notice a natural light again. This will be the light that shines from the crystal sea palace. From then on, you will encounter many kinds of sea creatures, all of whom live under the rule and protection of Dragon Emperor. If you see any beings with long, winding necks, don't be alarmed. Just announce, I am a messenger being sent to Nagaraja, and you will not be hindered from continuing on your way. At Dragon Emperor's palace, you will not encounter any guards, since everyone knows well enough not to disturb him during his hours of meditation and work. You may freely enter and announce your arrival. If Dragon Emperor is free to meet you, he will appear in person. Mai stopped a moment to catch her breath, and then continued. That's not all. The Sea Princess also said, before you go, you must find a spring of fresh water to fill a jug. Our Dragon Father will need that water to make rain. There's a chamber of clouds beneath the sea. Dragon Emperor holds the only key. He cannot make rain good for the land unless he has fresh water. The riverbeds are all muddy or dry, but I know of a deep well not far from the shores of the Eastern Sea. The well itself is dry, but beneath it lies a path that leads to a hidden spring. There is still plenty of fresh, clear water gathered there in a large, stone-lined pool. Once you've filled your jug with water, follow the dry stream bed beneath the well. It will lead you straight out to the Eastern Sea without your having to climb back out of the well. Hanh thought carefully to himself. Tomorrow morning I must depart, and Mai must accompany me. He repeated everything Mai had said, and the expression in her face assured him he remembered every detail. Mai said, now for the mantra. I'll recite it so you can learn it too. We should both know it in case one of us forgets part of it along the way. Here it goes. Ruler of all that lives, above and below the sea, far and wide, all proclaim, valiant Lord Naga's fame. Monsters all lie in fear when the Dragon Lord appears. Gate Paragate. They recited the mantra several times until Hanh was certain he knew it by heart. They promised to meet each other the next morning by the village gate when the morning mist was just beginning to lift. That night, Mai told her mother the whole story. Her mother listened intently. When Mai finished, her mother went to an old chest and held the family's treasured belongings. She took out a small vial containing a dozen or so tablets that resembled small white beans. She told Mai, this is a magic herbal medicine which Goddess Alko gave to grandmother long ago. Our goddess mother gathered the herbs herself in the high mountains to make this remedy. That was in the days when she came down to visit people more frequently than she does now. Grandmother used this medicine to heal me once when I was at death's door. You have been chosen to go with Hanh. It may be a journey fraught with danger, but the people's life depends on it. Take this remedy with you. Keep it securely tucked in your pocket. You and Hanh may have need of it. Mai and her mother talked into the night. Finally, her mother insisted, Mai, get some rest to be prepared for your journey. When Mai met Hanh at daybreak, she first asked him whether or not he remembered the mantra. He nodded. He was carrying a jug fashioned from a gourd and had a coil of sturdy rope slung over his shoulder. Silently they walked in the morning mist. Leaves crackled beneath their feet, and Hanh sighed as he looked out over the wasted rice fields. If the quest was a success, a terrible famine could be averted. Some families had already abandoned the village to migrate north in hopes of finding cooler regions less affected by the drought. Mai's own family was making preparations to move. Hanh doubted they would find better conditions. There was little hope of finding new large lakes enough to irrigate fields of rice and vegetables. His family were determined to remain and to live or die on their ancestral land. If Mai's family moved, she would have to follow them, and Hanh was afraid he might never see her again. In fact, Hanh had confided in Mai that he hoped her family would ask for him in marriage. Hanh and Mai reached the well the sea princess had described. Mai peered down the well, but it was too dark to make anything out. Hanh shook his head in a gesture of concern. He uncoiled the rope, secured one end around a tree, and tossed the other end down the well. Grabbing hold of the rope, Hanh eased his way down into the black mouth of the well. Mai waited, growing anxious. She shouted his name, but heard only her own echo. Finally she heard Hanh, muffled voice, but she could not make out the words. Soon, however, he reappeared. He had hoisted himself up, and he sat on the well's rim. The well is very deep and dark, but the jadestone casts enough light to see. Climb onto my back and hold tightly. I'll tie a strip of cloth around us to further secure you. Mai shut her eyes to lessen her fear and clung tightly to Han's neck and shoulders as he began to work his way back down the sides of the well. It seemed as though they would never reach the bottom. She opened her eyes and was surprised to see the light cast by the jadestone. At last they touched the ground. Mai climbed off Han's back and let him rest several minutes. The air around them was dank and stale. Han held up the jadestone so they could take a look around them. They found a low, narrow entrance to a cave. Han crawled through first, discovering that it was roomy enough to stand on the other side. Pure white stalagmites and stalactites glimmered in the jadestone's light. Han called Mai to join him. They followed a path lined with stones until they reached a stream bed. As the magic fish had counselled, they followed it upstream. The fine sand beneath their feet grew cooler the farther they walked. They had to climb over several large rocks before hearing the gurgling of running water. Up ahead hung a thick curtain of stalactites over a barrier of pale green rocks. The sand beneath their feet was damp. Mai waited as Han climbed the green rocks to take a look at the other side. "Water!" he shouted. Millions of clear drops dripped from stalactites into the immense pool. Han helped Mai climb up. It was a wondrous sight. Not a ripple stirred on the pool's surface. The only sound was the gentle pitter-patter of falling drops. As she looked at this source of hidden, cool water, Mai thought about the scorched land above. She thought too about how Goddess Alko's tears were the source of all fresh water. She took the gourd from Han and dipped it into the water. She capped it and then tied it securely across Han's back. Together they climbed back down the barrier of green rocks and retraced their steps down the stream bed. Love filled their hearts as they skipped along the sand. They passed the well and followed the stream bed that would lead out to the eastern sea. Because the path had been the heart of a stream, the sand was soft and they could walk easily. But before long, rocks jutted along the path, until it was so thick it was impossible to make out a proper path at all. Hanh and Mai were forced to climb over boulders. A terrible stench suddenly made Mai stop in her tracks. She looked at Hanh to see if he had noticed anything. He cried out, "What a terrible smell!" Mai screamed. Beneath her feet were the skeletal remains of a human. Human bones lay strewn all about. Hanh grabbed her arm. "We must be near the sea, Mother's sea monster's den. Remain calm. Do you remember the mantra?" Mai nodded. Though she was frightened, the mantra was secure in her memory. Trying not to make a sound, they made their way forward. A dim light filtered over the rocks, and they could make out the sounds of the tides. They were within reach of the eastern sea. Without warning, the sea monster appeared from behind a giant boulder, clutching a fisherman in its jaws. The monster was taller than the haystack outside Mai's house and at least 50 feet long. It was covered with black and white scales, its forbidding tail lashed back and forth like a whip. Hanh let go of Mai's arm and motioned for her to move back. With all the strength he could muster, he jumped against the monster's throat. The sudden blow caused the monster to drop the fisherman. He lunged at Hanh, opened its mouth to reveal 2 rows of dagger-sharp teeth. Hanh jumped out of the way in the nick of time. "Mai, recite the mantra." Hanh knew he could not possibly match the monster's strength. The most he could do was try to avoid the lethal thrashes of its tail and its sharp teeth. After jumping out of the way for the 4th time, he heard Mai's voice rising clear and strong in the cave. "Ruler of all that lives, above and below in the sea, far and wide, all proclaim, valiant Lord Naga's fame." The monster looked about as if confused. Seeing the monster's hesitation, Hanh bellowed the last lines of the mantra himself. "Monsters all lie in fear when the dragon lord appears. Gate Paragate." Gate Paragate echoed in the cave like thunder. The sea monster fled in the direction from which it had come, disappearing from sight. The mantra had worked. And you can hear the second part of the voyage next Sunday at 7 p.m. Good night.